Okay, I don't want to share the screen. Hey, hello. How is everybody? How was Thanksgiving? Did you have fun? And are you still full? I'm still full. I'm still full of stuffing and turkey and gravy and mashed potatoes and you name it, I'm full of it. So my name is Sabrina Wilson. I am your chef today, who is going to be teaching you some interesting cookie recipes. We did have a little change at the last minute. I apologize for those of you who were on who didn't get that message. Um, there was a little mix-up. My secretary thought that we were doing one class and we actually were doing another. So my apologies about that. My stage name or business name is La Jolie Chef. So for those of you who speak French, that is the pretty chef. So it's pretty easy to pronounce and a little different. So there's my name. So today we're going to be making. We're going to do chocolate chip cookie balls, which did not require any eggs. So that's very important for any kind of a cookie that will be eaten like that. So a cookie ball you might put in a container with a lid on it and enjoy them at your leisure. You would put them in the refrigerator probably, but in fact, if they don't have eggs in them, it's always good to put them in the refrigerator because if it has butter, that's a dairy product, so you want to make sure that you do keep them cold. But uh, there are things with eggs, raw eggs, especially people with certain medical conditions, anybody who's pregnant, which wouldn't apply to this audience. You always, you always want to make sure, like these cookies, the chocolate chip cookies that we were originally going to make did not have egg in it. So the reason we're switching it is because the parties involved didn't have chocolate chips. So we're going to do a quick turnaround and we're going to do sugar cookies instead. Um, and I know we did sugar cookies early on. So the twist with this is that we're going to, we can do some different shapes and they can be made into ornaments. Now, because of the last minute switcheroo, I don't have any ribbon, but I can show you. I don't think I have string, but I can show you how to put a little hole at the top of the cookie once we roll it out and put it in the oven. And that is what you can, as long as you make the hole before you bake them, you can, then you have the hole in there and then you bake them and then there's a hole when you're done and then you very gently string a ribbon through and now you have an ornament. Uh, so let's get started. I'm going to find my rolling pin, which I did not get, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I left a lot of the measuring for us to do together. So a lot of times I do it ahead of time so that you have a finished product to look at. I did not do that today, so we're going to do this all together. So just a quick aside here, for those of you who uh, are bakers already, this is a French rolling pin. Um, this is mine that I brought from Paris many years ago. Um, most this is the only rolling pin I have. Most rolling pins, typical ones you find in your grandmother's house, look like this, sort of. It's about this long, and it has little handles on either end. I tend to like this because you get a lot more, you can do a lot more movement with it because it's very long. I like that. So, all right. So what I'm going to have to ask you to do is listen to me while I start telling you. I'm going to tell you what the ingredients are. This is the original recipe that we're going to do, the chocolate chip cookie dough balls, which are very easy. You'd actually throw them in the freezer and eat them, for tea. But we're going to do the sugar cookies recipe. So we're going to start out with, and I'm just going to have to read you the ingredients. I don't know. I don't see anybody on here. Is Justin on? Justin, are you here? I don't think Justin's here. I think it's just me. Okay. All right. Well, I've been told that I need to start on time, so that's what we're doing. I don't see anybody else here. It's just me. All right. So we're gonna get started. So I gave you my little blurb, my little chat about the rolling pin. So the next thing we're gonna do is the first ingredient that we're gonna work with is the butter. 1 1/2 cups of butter. So you'll notice with a lot of recipes, they either have cups or they have grams. This particular one has milliliters, which I find a little odd. It's very strange. Mostly you'll find it in ounces or grams. Grams is more a European measurement, ounces is more American. A lot of bakers only use a scale. So for our purposes today, we're going to keep it very simple. We're not going to use a scale. So a lot of you will get butter and you'll have it in 4 quarters, right? So 4 quarters make a whole, right? Four forks make a whole. And this is 1 stick of butter, which is 4 ounces. So this recipe calls for the butter. I have to find my cloth here. Most recipes when you're baking will call for butter, unless you're making pastry, which calls for very cold butter. You'll want butter that's room temperature. So because my butter is not room temperature, because we switch things at the last minute, so I'm going to be taking 3 sticks, which is 1 1/2 cups. So 2 sticks each stick is 4 ounces. So you will be using a little bit of your math here. 4 ounces each stick. So that's right here is 1 cup. And then we have the last stick that I'm going to take the paper off of. And that's the last 4 ounces. So that's 1 cup and a half. So in the food industry, in the restaurant business, in cooking classes, catering, wherever you are, a lot of times this is a good example of what happens. Sometimes you have to switch things at the last minute. Like say you're going to do a special and suddenly the chef comes to you, the other chef, and says, oh my God, we don't have any capers for the sauce that's supposed to go on the fish. So you have to do what they call punt. You have to come up with another idea. You have to use a different ingredient. So that's what we're doing today. The parties that are involved didn't have the chocolate chips. We had a little change. So we're going to do something different. So this, because this was not room temperature, I'm going to put it in the microwave. This is sort of a trick of the trade. You just have to be extremely careful. You zap it for like 5-second increments because you do not want the butter melted. You just want it soft. So we're going to stick it right in my trusty microwave, and I'm going to do time cook and do 10. Well, we'll start with 10 seconds. I may pull it out of 5. So we just want it soft because we're going to put it in the mixer and we're going to beat it. So a lot of the reason there are a lot of different methods for making cookies or making cake. And many of them start out with creaming your butter and then adding your sugar. That's a pretty typical way of starting off a recipe. So, oops. So I did it for 10 seconds. Now I'm doing it for 10 seconds more. But with anything like this, when you have to just soften something, you have to stand there. Just like when you're cooking nuts in the oven, as soon as you walk away, they burn. You could stand there for 10 minutes and they don't do anything, and then suddenly you walk away and they burn. That just seems to be what happens. So you'll see, if you can see in the camera, that this is now, I can stick my finger in it, and that's perfect. So that solved our problem of having very cold butter. And then whenever you do anything with your KitchenAid, or if you have a hand mixer, you can do this recipe by hand. I'm a big believer in the KitchenAid because I don't quite have that. I don't have that muscle strength that I once had, perhaps. So I want to make sure that I get it beaten up correctly. And so that's why I use the KitchenAid. A lot of these kinds of equipment you can get online. You can get on secondhand. I mean to say, you could get it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So I'm going to dump this 1.5 cups of butter right in here. So I don't, since I'm working solo today, I don't have anybody give you a cue card. And unlike Martha Stewart, I don't have many minions underneath in the background doing things for me. So it's me, and I will go along as best I can. So we have the sugar in here, and this is a recipe that is pretty straightforward. So some recipes call for creaming the butter alone, and then adding the sugar. This recipe calls for creaming the sugar, creaming the butter, and the sugar together. So we have regular sugar here, granulated sugar, that I'm going to measure out. I have my measuring cups, and it's 2 cups of sugar. Of course, because it's sugar cookies, we have a lot of sugar. Some recipes call for, some people like to put in some part white sugar, part brown sugar. For today's purposes, I'm just going to stick to the recipe because it calls for regular sugar. So you want to get a nice even cup of sugar here. Move this over here. This is a lot of the reason why particularly some pastry chefs are like purists. They want to weigh everything because they don't want, they want to make sure it's accurate. And there is a little bit of a difference between, measuring things with a measuring cup and weighing. Not much for today's purposes. Okay, another cup. So we've got the 1.5 cups of butter in here, and 1 cup of sugar I put in, and now I'm going to add 1 more. And cookie cutters, you may have some that your mom had from her mom, and that seems to be one of those things that people have in their homes from generation to generation. I know for years I had a gingerbread cookie man that I think I had when I was about 5 years old. It was all bent. I don't really know where that cookie cutter is now, but I had it for a long time. So they're pretty inexpensive. Wherever you are, most towns in the United States have a Michael's, and Michael's is a good place to buy. I just actually bought this gingerbread cookie cutter. I like mine bigger, really, but this is adequate. Of course, one side of it is kind of sharp, the other side is rounded. So there's that. And this is not particularly Christmas things in here. I think this might be my Easter basket, but some of these would work. The star, maybe we could use that. The star, the gingerbread man. So, all right, so we have 2 cups of sugar in here with the butter. And we're gonna lock the machine and plug it in first because we won't get very far. We don't have it plugged in. And then we're gonna let it go. Want to start it off a little low because otherwise whatever is powdery, whether it's flour or sugar, will end up in all over the place. So you don't want to be covered with flour. It's also important when you cook, when you bake, when you do anything in the kitchen. I'm sure some of you have had your mothers tell you this to clean up as you go. Because if you clean up as you go, then whoever is responsible for the dishes at the end of the project doesn't suffer so much. And it just makes it easier to work. So we have the cups so we have a cup and a half of butter. This is unsalted butter. You'll notice when you go to the grocery store, you have salted butter and unsalted butter. For the most part, unsalted butter is used for baking. Salted butter is used for savory, for main dishes. Although I did have a chef that I worked with once who she did use unsalted butter, but she was one of the ones that made me realize how important salt is in a sweet recipe, because salt is sort of what lifts up the flavor in the cookie, whatever it is. Whether it's chocolate or almond or even a sugar cookie, it lifts the flavor of the butter and the flavor of the cookie in itself. So we're going to let this go for a few minutes. So part of the reason you want to why the method is to beat the sugar and the butter together, it helps to aerate the dough. And you want to combine it. You'll notice if you make a mistake doing a recipe and you add something in the wrong order, a lot of times you think, oh, how can that make such a difference? It doesn't matter. And you'll find that at the end, whatever it is that you're making, it's like, oh, wow, something went wrong, or the texture's off, or it didn't rise, or, that's one thing, the reason why a lot of people are afraid of baking, I think, is because it's a lot more unforgiving than savory than regular cooking. If you want to make chicken soup and you add too much celery into it, it's really not going to make a difference. But if you're baking and you're off on your measurements, it will affect the recipe. So what's very good for this would be a spatula. I can't find mine right now, but when you're beating the sugar and the butter, you always want to make sure that you wipe down. You'll see that a lot in recipes where it says scrape down the sides. So that basically is just, whenever you mix something, the beater doesn't go all the way around. So you want to make sure that you cover everything by going in there and getting what's on the side and getting it down in the bottom of the bowl. So I think I'm still alone. I don't see Jason. I'm not sure where Jason is, but so we're gonna let that go for a minute more, and I'm gonna get my vanilla extract and my eggs. So, I have my eggs here, vanilla. I also have some almond extract, which we could put in. I'm gonna beat it down. I'm gonna wipe down the bowl once more. And you can see, if you can see from over there, that the difference in the way the butter looks. Maybe I can come closer to the screen. So when you beat the butter and the sugar together, what happens is it gets lighter. I don't know if you can see that from here, but what's here is a dark yellow and this is white. So that's showing me that there's getting air into it, and it's incorporating the butter and the sugar, which is what you want. You're never going to completely get rid of the grain, of the sugar at this juncture, but you want it as incorporated as possible. And this is probably the one time that you can't overbeat it. I mean, a lot of recipes will say, "Oh, don't overbeat it," but that means at the tail end of the process where you already have the flour in it. Because if you overbeat whatever you're making with the cookies, particularly with the flour in it or cake, you end up, overwork the flour, and then you overwork the gluten, and then it affects the cake, it affects the cookies, it affects the final product. So at that point, we don't want to put too much in. So right now, so I hope everybody's following me. We have a cup and a half of unsalted butter in the bowl, and we have 2 cups of granulated sugar. If you wanted to, you could use brown sugar. You could use half brown sugar, half white sugar. Some people like to do that. You could probably even use coconut sugar if you wanted to, which is just discovered it. It's kind of nice. It's lower on the glycemic index. So some people like it if they're trying to watch their sugar. So now we're nice and incorporated. The butter is it's nice and white. I am in the process of getting, I've heard that there's something I can put my camera on a tripod that faces down onto the board. So that's eventually what I'm going to do, and then we won't have to do this coming up to the screen. But if you can see it, it's very light and fluffy, and that's what we want. So eventually when I have my camera on a tripod on the table, that will show you what my hands are doing, and I can talk into the screen, so I won't have to keep lifting up the bowl. So, all right, so now we have the cup and a half of unsalted butter. We have 2 cups of sugar in there, and now we're going to add, this is a very nice variety of vanilla extract. It's Rodelle, it's more expensive, but I find it more flavorful. Of course, there are many different types of vanilla. You know, you certainly, for the sake of cooking sugar cookies at Christmas, you can just make regular, you can use regular vanilla extract that you get at the grocery store. If you have a little extra money and you're so inclined, you can, what I love is, the name of the company just went out of my head, but they make a vanilla bean paste. So some of you may know, vanilla comes from a bean in the islands. There's a little picture of the bean here. There is a long, thin brown bean. And if you're baking, if you're a baker, and you don't have vanilla bean paste, you take the bean and you'd open it up, and then on the inside of it are all the tiny little vanilla beans, the little tiny seeds. So you scrape that out. So what the vanilla bean paste is, it comes in a container like this. Those are all those little tiny seeds. So that's really expensive. A very large container could probably go for as much as 20 or 30 bucks. However, I like it better because it's much more concentrated, and I feel like it gives more of a kick of vanilla. So it is expensive. It's not necessary. That's just sort of a fun thing. So here we have the vanilla. It's calling for a teaspoon of vanilla. I always put in more vanilla than it calls for, just because I like the taste of vanilla. So we have, this is a teaspoon. So, you know, I'm probably notorious for most chefs. I measure everything, but I don't necessarily always measure vanilla. So we're going to put that in, but I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons, because I think sugar cookies should have a lot of flavor, a lot of nice vanilla flavor. I'm going to leave the almond extract out, but you'll find, even if you go to the grocery store or Michael's, you'll find there's a lot of extracts. There's vanilla extract, almond extract, there's peppermint, spearmint. I mean, they've come up with all different kinds of extracts. So, and then the next thing that goes in there are the eggs. Now, most of the time when you cook with your parents, you probably watched your mother take the egg and hit the side of the bowl and drop it in there. So that's perfectly acceptable way to do it. But in the professional cooking world, one of the things you learn early on is that God forbid that you get eggshell in whatever it is that you're making. So the safer way to do it is to crack the egg in a bowl, and put them in here. Then that way, once you put it in here, if you do get an eggshell in it, you can fish it out with the side of your eggshell. You can go in there. But if you do this, just crack it here and the eggshell goes in there, you're lost, because the eggshell will go into the very white looking butter, and that'll be that. So this recipe now, the next section is calling for 4 eggs. So we have the butter, 1.5 cups of butter, 2 cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and now we're going to add 4 eggs. The other thing to take note of when you're making any sort of cookies or baked products, it matters how you add the eggs. So, you know, if you don't know better, you will take the eggs and just drop it all in. And, you know, that's not the end of the world, but it's better to add them a little bit at a time, like add one and then let it mix up. Scrape the bowl down and then add the rest. I'm going to scrape the bowl now. And as I said before, that what's much better is to use a spatula. Woo! This is looking really nice now. It's getting very fluffy. It's very fluffy and light color. So we're going to have some nice looking cookies here. I'm going to put it back down here. I'm going to turn the oven on. So I would ask if anybody had any questions, but I'm not quite sure who's here. So maybe just me. But if that's the case, I am an actor and a singer. I do that when I'm not cooking. I can be found on stage. We haven't had a lot of productions lately, of course, because of COVID. But it's always good, whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a monologue or singing a song or doing a recipe in front of the camera. It's always the more practice, the better. So I am adding the eggs one at a time. Not going crazy, taking my time, but a little bit. So I'm sorry about that. That's my dog, who's dogs are always a guard dog. So, okay, Bailey. All right, so here's the last egg I'm putting in. Here we go. So anybody have any questions? No questions. I don't think so, because I don't know who's here. I think it's me. Because usually, oh, I see somebody. Did someone come in? Somebody came in. Okay. Here we go. Hello? Okay. So we're moving along. We started, I'm not sure who that is. Hello, glad you're here. I'm going to put my dog in. So I'll catch you up on where we are at. I start my classes at 4 o'clock. So I will catch you up. So I explained, is it possible for the iPhone person to introduce themselves? You have to take yourself off mute.
Jayana.
Say it again.
Jayana.
Jayana, do you have a picture on your phone? Are you able to set it up so I can see you?
I don't have any stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all right. But you can see. Can you see me?
Yeah.
You can see me, but I can't see you. Okay. All right. And you have some of the ingredients for the cookies?
What's the ingredients?
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to keep moving. So I'm not sure if you got the all the information, but the class does start at 4 o'clock because we have a lot to cover, and I have to start on time in order to cover everything. So I'll just catch you up a little bit. So we were going to make chocolate chip cookie dough balls, but then that was an error. So we realized that the participants didn't necessarily have everything like the chocolate chips. So we did a quick turnaround at the last minute, and we're making, instead of making the dough balls, we're just gonna make sugar cookies, which we did do early on, but we're gonna set it up so that we can make some ornaments out of them. So far we have, if you wanna write this down, you have 1.5 cups of butter, room temperature unsalted butter in the bowl. You have 2 cups of sugar, and you have 4 eggs and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. So that's what's mixing now. Now we're gonna measure out the flour, and baking powder. So the other thing, so we're gonna add 5 cups of flour. Oh, so much flour. My goodness. Okay. So we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So one of the things that is very important to take note of when you're measuring anything is to make sure that you have a nice flat, a nice level spoon. So we put in 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and I'm sure a lot of you know, if you've done any baking, you know that baking powder and baking soda are both leaveners. And it's very important when you look into using these things that you check your cover periodically to see what the date is on the bottom of the can. So mine says good until January 1st, 2021. So I have a little bit more time. This baking soda says best if used by October 19th, 2022. So we're good with that. But since they're leaveners and they're sort of particular, you want to make sure that you replace them frequently, because they don't, the product, the ingredients in them that make them a leavener don't last forever. So it's good to replace them. Okay. So iPhone has entered the waiting room. Okay. All right. I don't know what that is. Okay. All right. So I measured out, I put 2 teaspoons of baking powder in the bowl, and now I'm going to measure out 4 cups of flour. 5 cups of flour. This is a big recipe. You want to make sure with the flour also that when you make it, you level it off so it's because if you do it a heap, something like this would be called heaping. So that's not accurate. That's why a lot of bakers, as I said before, that's why a lot of bakers weigh out their ingredients and they don't measure it like this, because the weighing things eliminates any error. This, if someone wasn't paying attention or didn't know, this would totally change the final product, because it wouldn't be the right amount. So I'm doing that. So that makes 2. Three. This is the 4th cup. Four and 5. Okay. We have 5. So I'm just going to put my spoon right here and get a lot of this stuff out of the way so you can see. All right. So I noticed with this particular recipe, they don't have salt, which I'm just going to add a pinch of salt because I think that's good to add a little bit of salt. All right. So now we're going to lower the machine a little bit. You can see with the butter, this just has the egg in it. Let's see what it looks like. Hey, Babs, how are you?
I'm good. Do you have anybody in
No, it's me, and we're having a wonderful time.
here? Okay.
I can't remember her name. One little girl came on her iPhone. And I said hello, and she said she didn't have she could see me, but I couldn't see her.
Okay, so is she still going to be in the class, or what happened to her?
I don't know. She came in for a minute, then she went in the waiting room, and then she disappeared. So I don't really know. I'm not exactly sure what happened.
So is Yuhan not coming?
I don't see you on, and I don't see Justin. And I did email him earlier.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
All right, let me just do a little check and find out what's going on. I'll be back. You go ahead and keep it going,
Right.
and we'll send them the video.
Good. All right. So
Thank you.
All right. Bye. We have the eggs in here. 4 eggs, a cup and a half of butter, 2 cups of sugar. So, and we're going to add the flour. But as I said before, you want to put the machine on low, as low as you can get it, because you don't want the flour to go all over the place. So there are a million different cookie recipes. I have my own. This is not mine, so I'm just double checking everything. Oh, it does say salt. I lied. There is salt. Teaspoon of salt. Okay, so I'm adding the flour slowly. This is not the best container for it, but I'm going to turn it on low. Have to add it in there. Actually, I'm going to pick it up and can't really add it all at once, but it's hard to get it low enough. And then at one point, the same thing. You want to, scrape down the sides, the same thing, so that you incorporate everything. Because if you don't do that, then eventually you're going to have. You're going to have the mixture of cookies, but you're going to have a variety of different things here that aren't necessarily going to be all mixed up with the same texture, and that won't be good. So. There's no way to bake and be completely without a mess. So I never really worry whether you have something a little flour flying around. It shows that you're working hard. Okay, so we're going to scrape it down again. So sugar cookie dough is a really great dough to make ornaments out of. So, if you're making ornaments, you make regular sugar cookies, you might roll them out so they're thinner. But when you're doing ornaments, you're going to make them a little fatter. So, for obvious reasons, so that they don't, so that they're less likely to break. And I mentioned before, I don't have any ribbon, but what we'll do once we roll them out is we're going to leave. It's very easy to make a little hole. You can even do it with a toothpick if you want to. A little hole about that big at the top of the cookie, whatever the shape happens to be, and then that's once it bakes, you'll have the hole there, and then that's what you'll thread your string or your ribbon through. So that's it. So we mixed it all up, and we are going to roll it out to a half an inch. So this recipe says you can add one. You could do this recipe, and half of it could be cocoa powder. I'm going to make sure that you get this recipe. For today, just to keep it simple, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to leave it like this. And as I said, it's much better. This is a wooden spoon, which is always good in the kitchen, but it's much better when you have to take things off a blade or something like that. It's much better to have a spatula. That works much better. All right, so I'm going to get some parchment paper. Okay. So now most cookie recipes will tell you that they want you to chill it. And the reason for that is that anytime you do anything anything to do with flour has gluten in it. So when you mix it, it activates the gluten. So, I'm not a scientist, so I can't give you all the bells and whistles of the science part of it at this time. But it needs, in short, it activates the gluten. And if you've ever made pie dough or you made pizza dough, pie dough is probably the best example where you make it and it kind of like you roll it out, but you have a circle and then it shrinks. The same thing happens to pizza dough and the gluten's being activated. So that's with cookies in particular, that's why you always want to let it rest. We're going to let it rest for a little bit, a few minutes, but not the whole thing because otherwise we're going to run out of time. And it's already, time flies when you're having fun. It's already 20:05. So let me see if I can find my spatula because this is definitely not working. All right. So here I have my spatula. This isn't the best spatula. I actually like ones that have a wider top and that are stiffer, but that's all right. And then I also have my pastry brush so that when we do roll out the dough, a lot of times before you put the dough on the tray, you want to make sure that you brush off the excess flour that you'll put down to roll it out because too much flour on the dough is going to make it tough. So, and we're always guilty of, sometimes too liberally dusting the board with flour, and then you run into a problem. So that's why you always have a pastry brush to brush your table. So we're just going to take all this dough right here, and you'll see, as much as the paddle is going around, there's still something at the bottom. You see, which is part of the reason that even if you scrape it down, you still might have stuff at the very bottom where the paddle doesn't reach. So we're going to get that up there and mix it in. So as I said, in an ideal world, what you would be doing would be making this, if you had enough time to let it rest overnight, that would be ideal, but at least an hour. But because, this is just an hour's class, we don't really have the time to do all that. So I'm going to, we're going to just keep going. And so this does not require kneading. I'm not kneading it. I'm just, because there was a little tiny bit of unmixed dough at the bottom, flour particles, I'm just kind of mixing it together. But it feels really, it's a good texture. And I'm going to go get the flour now, which I should have put on my hands before, which would keep you from getting that sticky. And this is, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it's all-purpose flour. I mean, some recipes call for cake flour, which is a much lighter cake, a lighter flour. A lot of times if you don't have, like if some recipe calls for cake flour, like, oh my God, I don't have cake flour. But there are substitutions, so you can take regular flour and then cut it with a little bit of cornstarch, which lightens up the flour. So it has a similar effect. So I'm just gonna put this down here and move it. And move the chocolate chips. And of course, I have white chocolate chips and dark chocolate chips here. So if you wanted to, for the ornaments, you could put these in if you wanted to, but probably not because they're going to be ornaments and hanging in the tree, and we don't want too many objects in there. You can do some decorations on them once you get them done. But for right now, we're just probably going to have time to roll them out and get some shapes. And then what I'll do is I'll make sure that whomever is watching gets a copy of this recipe, the ingredients, the method. That's what all recipes have. You'll have all the ingredients at the top in order of when they go in the bowl or the mixer. You have the ingredients, and then you have the method. So the method obviously is how you go about creating this recipe. The other part that always is on a recipe is the yield, and the yield means how many pieces is it going to make. So and the temperature of the oven. So those things you find at the top of the recipe. Everybody has a different way of writing a recipe. To me, the most important thing is the clearer the better. The simpler the better. This recipe has telling you to preheat the oven in the middle of the recipe. Now, I would say that I want to know when I'm doing a recipe, I want to know what the yield is right at the beginning. So if it says sugar cookies at the top, underneath, this is a recipe for sugar cookies, I want to know what's the yield right away. In other words, do I have to double the recipe or cut it in half, depending upon how much I want to make? So I want the title, the yield, and then right underneath that, I want to know the temperature of the oven. And early on, I also want to know what kind of equipment do I need? Do I need, I need a KitchenAid, I need a bowl, I need a spatula, rolling pin, etc. So you want to know all those things before you start making the cookies, because what if you start making the recipe and you get it all done and then you don't have everything that you need? So much of cooking is planning, really. And a lot of the things that you'll learn in math class that you think, my son said to me the other day, I'm not sure anything I learned in school was worth it. What did I learn all those things for? And I said, well, you never know when in your life you might need some of those things. So don't be so quick to say school was unnecessary. Because really when you cook or you bake, you really do need some basic rudimentary math skills. So what we really need, that I appear to have run out of, is I need parchment paper. Parchment paper you'll find right next to the tin foil at the grocery store. I'm trying to find my pan here. So I have two nice cookie sheets. It's nice to be able to do them on parchment paper, but if you don't have the parchment paper, you can use if you don't have the parchment paper, you can just rub it with a little butter or Pam and grease the pan. But you have to look at the recipe to see what it says. if it needs to be greased or not. So this says lined baking sheet. So preheat oven 400 degrees, parchment paper or silicone baking mat. So I can show you a silicone baking mat, which are, you know, a little expensive, but well worth the money. So we'll do one. Here's a silicone baking mat. It's really like rubbery. A lot of times you'll see muffin pans that are made out of silicone. They're very soft. They're really great because they save you a lot of cleanup. You just drop it right on the tray. My cookie sheets are a little small, so this is a little oversized, but it'll work. So we'll do the silicone on this one, and then we'll do a little bit of, I'll get some Pam and we'll spray this with Pam. And then I'm gonna roll out the cookies and talk about icing and an hour-long class goes by very fast. So this is just cheap Pam cooking spray. Some of them have fat in them and flour, depends. This is just regular. You don't have to go crazy. And then you want to make sure you get all the edges. So you can do it with your fingers, you can do it with a brush. I'm doing it with my fingers. So I'll put these over here for right now. Now we're going to roll out the cookies. So there's definitely an art to rolling out cookie dough. I wouldn't say it was my forte. It's part of the reason that I love these rolling pins, because with cookies, of course, you want to make sure that you get them as you want to make sure that they're all, when you roll out this piece of dough, you want to make sure that the dough is all the same thickness. Why do you want to make sure that the dough is all the same thickness? And if there was somebody out there to raise their hand, I would say, yes, you answer that question. So fairly obvious, I guess, is that if you roll out the dough, which sometimes happens until you get the knack of it. If you roll out the dough and, let's say this half is exactly, they're saying that these cookies should be 2 inches thick. So if you roll out the dough over here and they're all nice fat cookies, which is what we want for ornaments. And then the other side, it gets down to 1/8 of an inch, so they're too thin. So when you put those cookies into the oven, what do you think happens? You have the nice fat ones that cook perfectly and evenly, all the same color and temperature, and then they're done. They take maybe 12 minutes because they're fatter, and then the thinner cookies go the whole length of the 12 minutes that the recipe calls for, but they burn because they're too thin. So it's really, that's a lot of the reason you want to make sure that you have things that are the right thickness as best you can. But like anything else in the world, whether you're singing, acting, cooking, baking, whatever it is, skipping rope, riding a bicycle, it's practice. Everything is practice, right? So don't ever be afraid to try things, because you just have to learn how to do it, whatever it is. So we're kind of cheating here. We're not chilling the dough, but I want to make sure that we get to the whole thing. So I'm going to take half this dough. This is a lot of dough, which is a good thing, because you can, I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to take this piece and put it in a nice square, like when you're putting, we're going to roll this one out, but I'm just showing you. This is the dough, and this is what I like to do when I make the dough, is form it into a nice, pretty even square. When I put it away, when I'm going to wrap it in, I would wrap it in parchment paper if I had it. I don't appear to have any more parchment paper. That has to go on the list. So I'm going to use wax paper just to wrap it up. And then we're going to let this piece chill in the refrigerator, and I will make the rest of these tomorrow. I have some cookies I have to send to a friend in Afghanistan. So I did a little reading about sending things overseas, and it said that because it's going to the Army, the cookies actually, I'll send them out. I live in Connecticut, and they'll go out from my home in Connecticut, and they go to New York City, I think. And then from New York City, they go abroad. And it takes somewhere between 10 and 20 days for them to arrive. So I don't know what's going to happen to the cookies. I'm a little afraid, but I think sugar cookies would probably be a good choice because as long as I pack the box well and put them in baggies, they should be okay. So I'm going to put these in the fridge. And you also want to make sure when you're doing anything to do with baking, anything that's sweet, cookies, pie dough, anything sweet, you want to make sure that you put it in a separate place where there's no other kind of food product. That's why in a lot of restaurants, catering companies, they have everything separated. So the pastry chef is usually downstairs with all of his or her own equipment, their own oven, their own forks, knives, bowls, rolling pins, everything. So, because, all you need to do is put the cookie dough in the oven, in the refrigerator, and have a bowl of open onions next to them, or even closed onions, and the cookie dough, because it's so porous, would absorb the onion smell. So that's why you find those things are usually separate parts of the country, separate parts of the restaurant. So I'm rubbing my table with flour. I am going to be getting some kind of a tripod so that I can get my camera to look down on the table, because I can't, it's a little difficult for me. I can't really show you what's going on without moving the computer. But maybe if I lift it up. See, maybe you can just see without, I don't want to lose the computer here. You have to kind of pick it up. So, all right, hold on. All right, there we go. So you can't see my face, but you can see the dough, which is what we want until I can get the more fancy equipment. It actually works much better. So I floured my board. I probably have too much flour on here. You don't need this much flour. That's why a pastry brush is a great thing. Usually you do this when you're done with the cookies because you don't want too much flour on there. It's not good. So we have our nice little square. The reason we do a square like this is because it's a good jumping off place. You want to make sure that you have, if you start out like this, then you take the rolling pin and you move it around, and you're more apt to get an even surface all the way around. Then I put a little bit of flour on my board, on my rolling pin, because we don't want it to stick. And then we're just going to go back and forth until we get what seems like, then you keep moving it. You can see this is pretty, it's a little soft. As I said, we would do better if we chilled it, but we're going to go with this so that we can get an idea of how to roll and the thickness of the cookies that we need. And then as you go along, you want to make sure that you still have some flour underneath you, because if you lose the flour, then the dough sticks, and then whatever it is you're rolling out and making shapes with will break. So we don't want that. So this is looking pretty thick now, and I'm going to go get a ruler so I can show you the thickness. So I usually, when I do this, it's about a half an inch. And yeah. So the other thing you can do if you don't want to do it on a board is to get parchment paper and take what I'm doing now and roll it out in the parchment paper which is also a good method. So, there are a lot of different things. You'll find that, there are lots of different chefs out there, all of whom have different ways of doing things. And, that's the beauty of the Food Network. Everybody you watch, you learn something different because everyone comes from a different part of the world. Everybody has a different technique. So you watch what everybody else does, and then you decide what your technique is, which you probably will develop in time once you have enough practice. So this is quite thick, and see, the beauty of this is that you can really move it around because of the length of it. That's why I love this kind of a rolling pin, because you have a big piece of dough here, and if you have one of those little rolling pins, you really can't cover the same circumference. So my dough isn't perfect. It's not too bad. It's probably a little thicker up here than it is down there. But roughly, it's probably more like a quarter. It's probably not a half, but a quarter. Half an inch would probably be a little too thick. It's probably about a quarter of an inch. But my rolling technique is not perfect given the day, so it depends. It depends. So some of it might be just right, and some of it might be not so good. All right. So the other technique that's really good when making sugar cookies is to take whatever your cookie thing is. This is a little gingerbread man, and you dip it. You put a little bit of flour in the bowl, and you dip it in the flour, and then you put it on the cookie dough. So that just makes it go faster, and otherwise a lot of times it sticks, and then it pulls the dough, and then everything is misshapen. So when you're doing cookies like this, you want to make sure that try to get them as close together, like a bunch of gingerbread men or women holding hands. You want them you can see here, they're all together. And that's just trying to be efficient. Getting them all together. So we're probably not going to have time for me to show you the finished product, but I am going to finish doing this, and then I'm going to flip them upside. So the other technique that's really good is so you put them all down here with the gingerbread man, and then we're going to take the cookies and we're going to turn them. When we put them on the pan, this is right side up, this is upside down, so we turn them over. I don't know, it's one of those funny little things, and honestly, I probably should look up what the whole purpose behind that is. I learned it years ago, and I don't really know, but I've always done it. So you can see his arm broke, but you can squish it together. That's because it's very warm in here, and because we didn't chill the dough. So the dough is very malleable, which is okay for purposes of demonstration. But yeah. So I'm pulling it off the board, and as you can see, it's breaking a little bit, but we'll fix that. And then once we get it on here, I'm going to show you, you could use any kind of a utensil. You can make a little hole in the top, and right in the top of the cookie. And then you have to make it big enough. And then once it's completely cool, then you want to add you'll add your ribbon. And when you put these on the board, you're putting them, sugar cookies don't really spread that much, so you've got it like that. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to show you, so you have a lot of dough here. I would say probably a smallish cookie, you probably would have a good, at least 3 dozen cookies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, probably 3 to 4 dozen cookies, I would say this makes. The recipe itself that I'm using does not tell you what the yield is, which makes me crazy. But so yeah, it doesn't say. So they cook for 8 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna make the whole and put them in for 8. Oh no, I lied. Make 72 cookies. So I was right. 3 to 4 dozen. And then the icing I have here is powdered sugar and light corn syrup and water. And when I send this recipe through to Justin, I will add that in too. So of course, with that kind of icing, once they're completely dry and completely cool, you can ice them. And that's actually enough for a whole nother class, doing the decorations and the icing. There are lots of methods. You can pipe around the edge. You can flood the cookie. There are a million recipes. So let me show you how to make a hole. So here's a chopstick. So we're literally going to go on the top of his head, right here, and we're just going to make a little hole. And I'll do it, and then I'll show you. Pretty straightforward. But this is another reason why when you're making ornaments, you want to make it pretty thick, because if you make a hole and you're hanging it on your Christmas tree, it's definitely not going to, it won't, it's not going to hold up. It'll break if it's too thin when you have the added weight of the ribbon going through and hanging. So that's why you want to make sure the cookies are fat enough. One of these is definitely not fat, but they'll be all right. So there we go. We have the heads. The temperature of the oven is 400 degrees. You want to put it in the middle of the oven. Usually halfway through, you want to take the cookie tray and turn it around, because most of the time, most ovens are not even. That's why they calibrate an oven. Somebody comes in and checks out where they're, like a lot of times in an oven, you'll find you have hot spots, and that means that it probably needs to be calibrated. Like if you're cooking a pizza, one side of it gets black and the other side of it's okay, but so that spot in the back is a hot spot. It needs to be repaired by somebody. It needs to be calibrated. The oven needs to be calibrated. Okay, so these are Christmas ornament cookies are going in the oven, and I think we're going to have some other classes coming along where we're going to be decorating things for the holidays, maybe gingerbread cookies, and we're going to do a lot of we'll do some icing techniques and some decorating things, which should be fun. There are lots of things you can do with added items. You can make pine trees out of, with this kind of icing with a little green in it. You can make pine trees out of a upside down ice cream cone. You can make a pond, which is a little more complicated. You make that with caramel, but it turns shiny. And so there are lots of things. You can make logs out of cinnamon sticks. So there are lots of fun things to do. We hope that you come back. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something. Lo Jolie Chef here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.